Okay, and we are live. Welcome everyone to the Civil Court Candidates Forum. We're going to be hearing from some wonderful candidates this evening who are interested in running for civil court. We're going to do some brief introductions of who is here in the room, talk about the format, and what's going to be happening this evening. And then we're going to get to hear from the candidates. You don't want to hear us talk, you want to hear from other people talk this evening. I will start. Good evening, everyone. Julio Peña III. My pronouns are he, him, or they. I represent Assembly District 51 as district leader, which is Sunset Park, Red Hook, a little bit of Gowanus, Bay Ridge, tiny bit of Park Slope. And I've been a district leader for about 2 years now. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague up north, Christina.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Christina Noplatarski. I'm the female district leader for the 50th Assembly District, representing Greenpoint and Williamsburg, and looking forward to hearing from you all this evening. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thanks to everyone on Facebook who is tuning in. I'll keep it short and brief and pass it along to my colleague Maritza Davila, because she's next to me on the screen.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking out the time for being here today. I think it's important that these types of venues are not just kind of isolated, but that there's an open process. And this is why it's so important for me to be able to join these bright young people that bring so much to the table. I am Assemblywoman Maritza Davila. I represent the 53rd District. That encompasses Bushwick and Williamsburg, and well, now I'm a little bit further south to into Bushwick, and I'm also the female district leader of the 53rd District. Thank you. Oh, I am going to pass it to Emil Bazile.
Thank you, Maritza. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Emil Bazile. I'm the male district leader for the 50th Assembly District. And I totally agree with Maritza on just creating these spaces. There is so much importance and significance on us as having an understanding of what's going on in our judicial system in our borough and in our county. So I really appreciate you all taking the time and just introducing you all to our fellow members across the borough. So I'll pass it along to Shaquana.
Hi, everyone. Shaquana Boykin, she, her. I am in the 57th Assembly District. Our lines changed a little bit, but I am happy to be here, happy to have you all make sure that people know who's on the ballots. And I believe all of our district leaders here have went, so I'll pass it back to Julio.
Thank you, Shaquana. And I just to note, there are some other district leaders who may be joining us and or were not unable to make this. I just want to acknowledge District Leader Jesse Pierce from the 52nd Assembly District, District Leader Sammy Namiro Olivares from the 53rd Assembly District, and Doug Schneider from the 44th Assembly District. Let's go into discussing the format for this evening. Each candidate is going to get a 3-minute introduction of opportunity to tell us about yourself. And then we will turn it over to some questions from the different leaders. We'll have about 10 minutes per candidate. Hopefully, if we have some time after, we can ask some, if there's some follow-up questions, we can share, but we're trying to limit to 10 minutes per candidate. And then we'll go to the preceding candidate. So each candidate will speak 10 minutes, and then we'll go to the next candidate. We're trying to avoid some crosstalk, but friendly conversations are welcome, but we do want to hear from each individual candidate. The order we'll be hearing some candidates was very random. I just threw it together. So Please bear with me if you're further down on the list. And I tried to avoid alphabetical order because I always hated being towards the end, and I know. The first candidate, if no one has any questions, the first candidate we're going to hear from this evening is Shervial Mims, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. And if I didn't, please correct me.
You got it right, Shervial Mims.
Shervial, please take it away with your introduction.
Sure, and I just want to say thank you to all of the district leaders here, you, Mr. Pena, District Leader Naplotarski, Bazel, Boykin, District Leader and Assemblywoman Davila, District Leader Pierce, and I heard District Leader Schneider, although I'm not seeing him on my screen. But I just want to thank you for this opportunity to just introduce myself and just share some things about myself and the reason why I'm running for civil court judge here this evening. So again, my name is Shervial Mims, and I am running countywide for judge of the civil court right here in our beloved borough of Brooklyn. As some of you may know, if you know anything about the civil court, Brooklyn Civil, with more than 150 new cases filed each year, is the busiest court in New York City, and certainly the greater state of New York. So this means that any candidate for judicial office must be, as we would say in legalese, raw, that's ready, willing, and able to do the work. So I submit to all of you here this evening that I am ready, willing, and able, and I will pass muster in every category here. So firstly, having worked for the judiciary branch of government, for more than 13 years, I'm ready to be your judge. In my capacity as court attorney and now principal law secretary, please know that I have handled thousands of cases in the civil court, in the family court as well, and also in the Supreme Court, where I am now working. And I have never grown weary of this sheer volume of matters before us. I've never grown weary of the task. This is something that I love and I enjoy. In fact, it's my niche. So we'll often see, cases that are fraught with just unique situations and complexities. And I'll tell you, you really have to have the intellectual stamina, the patience and the work ethic to deal with these issues. All right. And these are issues that ultimately will affect, maybe even you or a member of your family, one of your neighbors, or really, quite frankly, any stakeholder here in Brooklyn. And I want you to know that I am acutely aware of that. And I'm sensitive to this very salient but important fact, that our courts are for you. I am in service, just as are some of my colleagues here today, because, we're public servants. And really, quite frankly, to be elevated to judge is just an increase in terms of your area of responsibility, but it's public service nonetheless. So I want you to know that I'm ready to be, that judge for you, impartial. I'll be prepared. I will be respectful and engaging. I will be empathetic to anyone who steps into the court. And that's my track record. I have a demonstrated track record of that, of being kind, moving forward with kindness first, being thoughtful and respectful to people that appear in court. And so I will tell you that you can expect that from me. That's my promise to you. And so I'm willing to do the work. So you can ask the early morning staff who could vouch for my early arrivals, in court. I get into the building at 7 and 7:15 in the morning. And that's because I'm enthusiastic about this work. I love what it is that I do. And so, they could vouch for me in terms of at least showing up. But I will be conscientious, and a hard worker. And that's really one of my defining qualities. And so I'm able to do this work. I understand that this is a cloak of authority that I'm asking the public to entrust me with. you know? And so I'm not motivated by the pomp and circumstance of it all, but rather my concentration and focus is meaningful and purposeful service. It's my life's mission. It's what is near and dear to me. And it's really for me to give to you. So it is including, you know, the discretion that judges have. When I think about all of the issues that we would typically see, I understand that every judge, you know, has a measure of discretion. That discretion is for the judge to exercise for purposes of you, on your behalf, to level the playing field, to give you more time to retain an attorney, to give time for there to be due process of law. You know, so I do understand also that every judge has a measure of discretion. And I promise you that I will certainly exercise my discretion to ensure that we can get as close, if not a just, but as close to a just result as we can. And so, you know, I want to thank you again. This is a little bit about me. I didn't go into everything that I've done in the courts, but I understand the anatomy of the civil court, understand the anatomy of a civil court case, spans the gamut: contractual disputes, foreclosures, matrimonials, no fault law, small claim, you name it, I've done it. And I've done it extremely well and to the best of my ability. And furthermore, I'll share with you that I also worked for 2 years as the court attorney to the supervising judge of the civil court. And so that means that, I mean, from the clerk staff to the court officer staff, as well as practicing attorneys, you know, who may have issues with, you know, some things that they see reoccurring in the courts, you know, how do you address that? So I've dealt with that. New judges coming into the court, not being acclimated with civil. I've worked with these judges to make sure that they can hit the ground running. You know, that's not to take away from their experience and their legal acumen, but I'm just saying, you know, the civil court, you know, this is what's in this part. These are the parts in this court. These are the kinds of cases you can expect in this part. You know, just acclimating the judge to the court as well as their court attorney. You know, so I've done that. Handling complaints about judges. You know, how do you address that with a judge? And I'm a court attorney. You know, so how do you do that? You do so respectfully, you do so carefully, but you do so assertively, and you make your point and you explain the situation at hand. So even right down to the anatomy of how this civil court is run, I understand it. And so my promise to all of you, that if I were to win your support, that I will be a judge who is conscientious, who is thoughtful, who is fair, who will listen to the litigants, you know, and I'm willing to do the work, to dig for the right answer. You know, so that's what I do every day. And I love this work. So it's akin to my service-oriented personality. You know, so thank you so much for your time, and I will yield back my time for any questions you may have for me.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from our fellow leaders?
Yes, I do. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Mimes. I think your explanation was awesome. I like the fact that you are a very warm-hearted individual. I appreciate that. And I think that we need to see a lot more of that in our court system, because as you are aware, we are seeing a big increase of a lot of young people committing heinous acts at this point. What I am looking at in your application is how long have you been doing civil cases?
13 years.
13 years, and only in civil court?
And only in civil court. And I'll
Okay.
tell you, I understand why you asked that. I can certainly be assigned to the criminal court or the family court as well.
Mental health, there's a lot of courts that people can. You never know when you become a judge where exactly they're going to need you, and more than likely are these places where judges do not want to be, or have been there for a long time and are elevated to another court setting. I'm not trying to put you in a corner, but
Okay,
again, we are lacking a good experienced judges that can hear these cases and also be fair and impartial, as you said yourself. And yes, we need that kindness, but at the same token, we need someone that is aware of all of the surroundings, where these crimes are being committed, but also understand that sometimes it's economical injustices that young people and families are facing. And it's unfortunate because this is what we're trapped in as, honestly, as Black and brown people. This is what we deal with all the time. But I'm glad that you picked up very quickly as to why I'm asking this question. How comfortable would you be if you were to be put in any of these courts that can take a lot out of a person? Because you seem to have a very great personality, good-hearted, and it can be a tough position to be put in, right? So I just want to hear a little bit of how
I want to thank you for that. And, I've skirted criminal court for a long time, right? I worked in the family court, and there, you've got really serious issues. You've got children at hand who need parents who are present. And I love the family court. I love matrimonial. And I've thought about, what happens, Chevelle, if you are assigned to the criminal court. I will say to you, Assemblywoman Davila, and all of you here that, first of all, I'll just roll up my sleeves and get it together and understand what's going on there. I've already started shadowing judges in the criminal court, not any particular judge, but these are open proceedings, and I want to see what goes on in arraignments. I mean, I understand what the legislature did as well. I understand the competing interest. I understand quite clearly, that we've moved from a risk-based assessment for setting bail to a charge-based assessment for setting bail. And I know that the legislature has found it prudent to remove the exercise of discretion that a judge would typically have, right? And it was to right some of the wrongs, that there were issues, and I can speak about this. This isn't my opinion, this is the truth, right? Like there were issues where there were some overwhelming amounts of bail being set against Black and brown people. And these are oftentimes young people who were now having to spend time in a wretched place like Rikers Island until they can get to trial. So I do understand that. And what I can say to you, Ms. Davila, and all of you here, that, obviously as a judge, I've got to uphold the Constitution of the United States. I've got to uphold the Constitution of our state of New York. I've got to adhere to the rules that are in place. But I do understand that these are serious matters. And to the extent that I can, I will certainly, address within my capacity and within my realm of authority, these issues. I know that there are diversion programs. I know that there are some other alternative things out there where if we can glean that there are some issues, we might find a way to address them. That's the best way that I can answer that question right now.
Thank you.
And in terms of my civil court experience and my family court experience and Supreme Court and not working in the criminal court, let me tell you something, there's nothing I can't do in the court system. I can do this work. I don't care what court they put me in. And it's because, like I believe in what I do. Like I believe in what I have work ethic, conscientious worker is what I am. So there's nothing I can't do in this court system. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Thank you for answering. I don't have any other questions, Julian.
Thank you. I just have one quick question before we go to the next candidate. I saw in your questionnaire, but one of the questions was, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to justice? And I really, however brief your answer was, I really enjoyed it. And your answer was the cost of litigation. And I was hoping you can expand on that, why you felt that.
Yeah, so it was it was a very brief answer. The cost of litigation to me is one of the greatest impediments to justice. Because if you can get there, and if you can get in court, and if you can have a lawyer that can advocate on your behalf, I mean, you have a really fair shot, not to say that pro se litigants won't, but to navigate the legal system requires a skill set. And I think that it poses as a huge impediment to justice. Now, I do know that the courts have done some things, and there are some issues percolating with different types of parties and different types of cases, you know, having an assigned lawyer as they would in a criminal court where your liberty is at stake. But when you have your tenancy at stake, like I know that there's an issue where they're trying to, you know, get some advocacy for, you know, landlord tenant matters as well. But I do think that the cost of litigation is an impediment. Particularly if you have a more complex case. You know, we have small claims court, and certainly, you know, I've observed many judges and even myself, when there's a pro se litigant that comes into court, we do our best to, you know, make sure that they have, you know, an opportunity to put on their case. But when you have a more complex case, it's very easy to be outsmarted by those. These are attorneys that did, you know, so I'll leave it at that.
No, thank you. I very much appreciate that.
Sure.
If there are no other questions, thank you so much, Ms. Mintz, for speaking with us this evening and letting
My
us hear
pleasure.
more about you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
And now we will hear from Patrick Hayes.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you, district leaders, for allowing me the time to present myself to you. As Julio stated earlier, I am running for civil court judge. That's countywide. I am definitely seeking, I want your support, and I'm definitely seeking your support, because Lord knows running countywide is a daunting task in of itself. A little bit about myself. I'm a product of New York's melting pot. My mother came from Puerto Rico when she was 16. She met my father, fell in love. I kind of dispute the love part, but they're still together. I am a product of public housing. I grew up in the Notion houses, and my family's really, most of my family members come from the Board of Education. Most of them are teachers. My mother was a teacher, my sister's kids, her sisters were teachers. So I have a large family of teachers. Prior to starting my office in Sunset Park, I started my legal career at the district attorney's office in Brooklyn. I worked a lot of different areas in the district attorney's office, from grand jury to criminal court. But my best area that I enjoyed working in was Domestic Violence Bureau. And why the Domestic Violence Bureau? Because that's where everything was so emotional. There were so many cases in Brooklyn. It didn't matter what color you were, what ethnic group, it didn't matter the money amount. Domestic violence was everywhere. There was a huge caseload, maybe from 150 to 250 cases, but you were expected to proceed to work through your cases and to come up to fair and just solutions to the problems. Thereafter, after I finished my career with the district attorney's office, I started my practice in the Sunset Park section of Brooklyn, which I consider the mosaic of Brooklyn, because not only are there different levels of Spanish there, but we have Asians there, and we have Arabic there, and we're all trying to work together for a common goal, which is, you know, justice, trying to get a piece of the American pie. My practice consists of doing criminal defense work, personal injury, real estate. That includes not only buying and selling, but property disputes, as well as fraudulent deed transfers, which tend to happen, unfortunately, to the elderly. Those are the most interesting cases. I would say my biggest professional achievement that I had working in my law office was getting a teenager off on a murder charge. Unfortunately, my client was a teenager. He heard about a street fight that was occurring in Fifth Avenue in Park Slope. Unfortunately, to his detriment, he went to go see this fight, where one person died and the other one was almost died. However, he had an eyewitness who stated that he participated in this violent gang assault. Well, it took hours. Myself, an investigator, and the teenager's mother, because she acted like the investigator. This Latin woman was not going to let her son go to jail for something he didn't do. Although he claimed he didn't do anything, you know, I never asked if you did or you didn't. I don't really care. I was trying to see what they can prove. Well, the long and the short is that we finally, after a lot of work, we got the eyewitness to recant his statement, and we had this indictment dismissed. That to me was my personal achievement, work-wise. But I also have a personal achievement for community-wise, because I'm in Sunset Park section of Brooklyn, and I really am concerned about my community. During the pandemic, around January 2021 to about June 2021, I developed a relationship with UA3, and I was able to get around 100 to 150 boxes of food to the neighborhood. So what I did was I worked out with United Volunteers, Sunset Park Lions Club, Our Lady Perpetual Help, and the Red Hook Resource Center. We worked together to bring boxes of food. I had to unload boxes of food on every week or every 2 weeks off of a tractor trailer to make sure that all these different groups had food to give out. It was a big issue then, because I remember food insecurity was a big issue because people were still not going out or not going to work. And there was a large part of the community, in my community, I always say my community because I feel it's part of my community, that are undocumented. So they had the most difficult time, and there was really not much for them for government benefit wise. So it was really important to really help out the community. So that would be my next personal achievement, but it's not work related, it's more community oriented. I'm not just totally for the community in Sunset Park. I'm in other areas. I also sit on the board of the YMCA because I also believe in kids. And the biggest, I think, drawback is not having enough YMCAs in Brooklyn. The YMCAs are important to every kid because they keep every kid off the street. They help them with their homework. They have a play area to actually play in that's safe. It also acts as a babysitting area for parents who are working. So it helps out both sides here. So not only do I sit on the YMCA in Coney Island, but I also sit on a board in the Bronx called the Bronx Community Reentry Center. Now, excuse me, that is an advisory board for a halfway house in the Bronx. So really we're like the go-between between the Federal Bureau of Prisons and the halfway house. So right now, since I'm chairperson right now, my biggest project right now is not only to getting PPEs to the facility, but we now have commitments from 2 large vendors to take in some of the clients from the facility as workers, hopefully to stay on as full-time, to stay on for good. As you know, or you may not know, recidivism is a bad, it's really high in any facility. So we're trying to avoid people going back into jail. So that's one of our big things right now, is trying to get corporate sponsors, even small stores, taken in residents to be employed with them. What else do I have here? Let's see. I've been an attorney for 27 years. I feel like as an attorney, as a private practitioner, you sort of act as a first responder because every client or potential client that comes into your door has a problem. And it's not just a problem where I broke my arm or I got into a car accident. Sometimes it can be as simple as, can you write me a letter to Con Ed? Can you write me a letter to Verizon? Which is all very simple things, but it's very important to the client. So sometimes it doesn't matter if it's the big case or the small case. I treat everyone that comes in like it's their, our full attention is applied to them. I am a graduate of New York Law School. I'm married. My wife's also an attorney. And I know that if I was selected as a judge, that I would be able to handle the workflow since I had a huge workflow in the district attorney's office. So I've done work as well as criminal and civil practice work. And I'm hoping that I would get the support of the district leaders here. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Do we have any questions from district leaders? Go ahead, Ms. Davila.
I want to ask a question after.
Go ahead. Sure. Marita?
I don't hear you.
We'll come back in a second. Shaquana?
Hey, thank you so much, Patrick. I was really interested in reading about the experience that you were talking about when it comes to young people. What I was hearing was that you are interested in giving people resources, or can you speak more to how you approach these partnerships that you were talking about you have?
Oh, between when I was doing the getting the food distribution?
Yeah, like were you
Okay.
doing the food distribution because you're running, or like this is
No.
something that you do? Okay, can you talk?
No, sure. No. I actually belong. I don't really belong to United Volunteers, but I do help them out. I do. Every year they put on a Three Kings special for the kids. So I've been one of the Three Kings for their events. So I do know the leaders there. Our Lady of Perpetual Help is the church on 59th Street, and I'm on 46th Street. So I do know some of the people who are there. And the Sunset Park Lions Club, I'm part of the Sunset Park Lions Club. So I do know that group too. And by being in these groups, you kind of learn who are some of the players in the neighborhood and who might be able to help you out. So that's how I knew some of these relationships. But I've been in the Lions Club for the last 6-7 years. So
Okay.
it's not something that I did just for running sake. I've been doing this for a while.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm ready. I have one question, Mr. Hayes Torres. It seems that you are a very accomplished attorney. You have your own practice, and just out of curiosity, what is compelling you to run countywide? Why do you want to run countywide?
I think countywide is my best only way of getting to the judiciary, into getting a judicial seat. I don't really want to choose countywide, but that seems like my only avenue, because a lot of these like some of these seats that are available are in certain districts, and it's hard to get into a district when you don't live in that district. I mean, you could really flow into a district, but you have to deal with the political party there that puts a stop to you sometimes if you wanted to run in a certain district. So it becomes a new hurdle, another hurdle to jump when you're trying to do that.
But you want to become a judge.
Oh, I
Because
do
you
want to
are
become a judge.
accomplished.
I
So
do want
my-
to be, I'm sorry.
yes. I apologize. You want to, why would you want to become a judge if
Okay.
you are?
I do want to become a judge. First of all, I have a role model. My aunt Margarita Lopez Torres, she was the surrogate. So we would always talk about how important it is for the court system and for the court system to have integrity, because not only do the practitioners rely on it, but the litigants that come before it. Once they lose that trust, then the system breaks down and they're going to have chaos. And, you know, from my experience, I see the biggest drawback right now in the judiciary is access to justice. And I know we throw that word around so often and it annoys me, but access to justice really is an obstacle, and if we don't find a solution for it, we're going to stay with that. And like I have ideas. I don't know how good they are, but I think there needs to be an expanded role for legal aid. They can expand the role for 18B attorneys. They have them for criminal, and they're only getting paid $75 an hour. So it's the cheapest, best deal that this state can do is by expanding the 18B panel to include in landlord tenant, to include, because landlord tenant's really, it's almost to me like a criminal case. You have an individual who comes in that's been living there for X amount of years, getting thrown out for maybe whatever reason. The developer comes along, purchases the property, and it's very costly, and they want people out so they can get the return on their investment. But without really taking into consideration the person who's been there for X amount of years. So there's some kind of rights, or there should be some kind of rights there where the landlord comes in with an attorney. The tenant should have an attorney, and it shouldn't really be based on the federal poverty level, because if you make X amount of $1,000 over that poverty level, you still can't afford the attorney. So there really should be something set up where there's an expanded role for legal aid as well as the 18B panel to really provide access. And that's where you're going to see people having more of their rights protected and not feel like the system gobbles them up, which I hear all the time. So that's why, that's some of the reasons why I feel I should, I want to run too. And also too, because I believe by doing a lot of community work, you do develop compassion and sensitivity to the plight of other people. So I believe that that's a quality that a judge needs to have. I would want my courtroom to be like that. I've gone through criminal court, and I don't mean to offend court officers, but it's somewhat disrespectful and somewhat intimidating. I even get intimidated sometimes. And that's sometimes a function of the judge. So if the judge put their foot down and requested different personnel, you would have a much friendlier atmosphere, because the litigant doesn't just come in there by themselves. They come in with their family. You got the kids in there. You got the wife in there. And I understand the kids come because there's no daycare, or else you wouldn't bring a kid to a criminal courthouse. So there's a lot of issues here. So not that one person can resolve it, but it's something that I recognize.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. And we are at time. We definitely appreciate you joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
And now we will hear from Devin Robinson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Devin Robinson. I'm running for Brooklyn Civil Court in Brooklyn's 1st Municipal District. The 1st District includes the neighborhoods of the Navy Yard, Fort Greene, Park Slope, Gowanus, Red Hook, Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, Columbia Heights, Borum Hill, downtown Brooklyn, Brooklyn Heights, Dumbo and Vinegar Hill. I think I got them all. I'm very excited to be running for judge in my neighborhood. I've lived here for more than 20 years. My wife, Andrea, and I, we have made our home here. We are building our family here. I know how lucky we are to live and work here. And in gratitude for that, I've tried to give back as best I can to my neighborhood, my community, my profession that's given so much to me. For example, for the past 11 years, I've been an active member of my local political club, IND, the Independent Neighborhood Democrats. With IND, I have tried to keep my neighbors informed about local issues and encourage them to get involved. For 7 years, I was one of 2 lay leaders that helped to run All Saints Episcopal Church here in Park Slope. As an attorney of more than 20 years, I've also tried to give back to my legal community. When I was in private practice for about 14 years, I gave up my weeknights to be a volunteer mediator and arbitrator in small claims court to help people resolve the kind of disputes you see every day. I left private practice then and joined the judiciary. I am the principal law clerk to Judge Devin Cohen in Brooklyn, now in Brooklyn Supreme Court. With Judge Cohen, I have helped mentor a diverse group of law student interns, several interns a year, all year round. I've accepted these types of responsibilities because I know that we have to do more to serve others. I think it's even become more apparent in the past 2 years during this pandemic how essential that is. And when the pandemic hit New York City back in February and March 2020, I made sure that when the courthouse shut down briefly, like so many other places shut down briefly, I made sure that Judge Cohen and I could continue doing the work of the court, even remotely. Judge Cohen and I got a list of all of our cases, and one by one, we contacted them to set up conferences over video chat or phone, whatever we could do to get the parties together to see if we could move the case that next step towards resolution or to even settle it outright. That's the kind of judge that I want to be. I want to be proactive, not reactive. I want to be engaged, attentive, industrious. There's nothing more fundamental. I think we've heard it all tonight, and we'll hear more of it. There's nothing more fundamental than the administration of justice. And I want to be responsible for that. And that's why I'm running for judge. And that's why I'm here talking to all of you. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Thank
Was that 3
you.
minutes?
Yeah, it's just under. Do we have any questions from leaders?
That's pretty good.
I have a question. And forgive me because I work in nonprofit, which is very far from the legal system. So can you describe a little bit about what a law clerk does on a day-to-day?
Absolutely. I know Chevelle talked about this a lot. And so I'll build on what she said, that a law clerk, sometimes called a law secretary or a court attorney, they are the primary legal assistants to a judge. For example, for Judge Cohen, judges might use their law clerks a little differently. But for example, anytime any case comes before us, no matter if it's for a conference, for a motion, for a trial, I research the case, the parties, the facts, the underlying law, and provide memorandum for the judge so that when they come in, we're not starting from scratch. We already know what the case is about, what the parties are, and we can discuss with them what we want to do next. I might be tasked to conference a case to get the parties together again to discuss what the case is about and how we might resolve it. I might be asked to draft judicial opinions for the judge's consideration and discussion, and other ancillary matters, jury charges, verdict sheets, that stuff.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Shaquana?
Hi, thank you, Devin.
Thanks so much.
I just had a question about, I know everyone can't see your questionnaire right now, but you answered a question about ethics and just like misconduct. And I wanted to ask that question out loud, like how, the question is, how would you handle a situation in which you become aware of professional or ethical misconduct by an attorney or a fellow judge? Could you just speak shortly about that?
Absolutely. So the answer I gave, I tried to sort of accept the possibility of a broad scope of things that might have happened. And so the first thing that I would want to do, as in any situation, is I want to be prepared. So I certainly don't want to rush headlong into some situation where I'm not completely aware of the facts or the circumstances or perhaps even the applicable law. Otherwise, I could, render perhaps a snap decision or an action that might be inappropriate. So first, I want to be prepared and understand what's going on. When I did think I have a good enough grasp of what's happening, depending on the level of what's happened, my first instinct might see if the parties could rectify whatever the transgression or misconduct was. If there's a possibility to sort of solve it within the universe of the case, that might be beneficial. If that's not possible because the misconduct is too egregious, or fixing it is just not a possibility, then perhaps you have to take other appropriate steps like referring that to attorney grievance or the Committee on Judicial Conduct.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Shaquana. Do we have any other questions? And Ms. Napletarski.
Thank you, Julio. So hello, Devin, nice to see you.
Very nice to see you.
Thanks. So just a question based off of one of the responses on your questionnaire. And you said when in reference to the question about what you perceive as being the greatest obstacles to justice, that on a practical level, there is a lack of knowledge of our rights and responsibilities. And so just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit and if there are any steps that you would take in the courtroom to make sure that litigants are aware of their responsibilities when appearing before you.
Absolutely. So I have to say that that this is something, as I was filling out this questionnaire, that struck me more than perhaps it struck me before. That when we talk about access to justice and obstacles to justice, it occurs to me how little education we get about that growing up. That when someone actually talks about the Fourth Amendment or the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, that's a history lesson. And it's not just a history lesson. And so I think it might be beneficial. I am not an educator. I am married to one and I am the son of one. But I think it certainly bears consideration that people should grow up understanding their rights, not just as a historical lesson, but as current application. And then, kind of building off a little bit more about other things that we discussed in my responses to the questionnaire, that I think it's important that a judge become as engaged as possible, that judges, I think, and sometimes, this metaphor is apt, but you'll hear a lot of judges say that I'm just an umpire. I call balls and strikes. And perhaps there are times where that's important, but I think by and large that judges better serve the parties and better serve the judicial system and justice itself to become more involved. And that I think there's a way to still, as a neutral arbiter, explain to parties what's expected of them, to give parties an understanding of what perhaps their rights and obligations are. And honestly, it's something that I did as best I could when I was an arbitrator in small claims court. You know, there you have almost entirely self-represented people who are there, and I think people have talked about this on this forum already. They come into court and they are overwhelmed and unmoored, and they don't know what's happening. And so, you know, sometimes they'll tell arbitrators when they're serving, don't talk to the parties, just listen, write your decision, and tell them thank you very much and goodbye. And they want you to do that because they don't want you to get involved in a discussion with them, because that might lead to arguments. But I didn't follow those rules. And I, as best I could, explain to them what their rights and responsibilities were in these situations. And I think by and large, honestly, they appreciated that. And when they knew that, they were more ready to resolve the thing without, you know, waiting for a decision from me.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Devin, do you have any other questions? Great. Thank you so much, Devin Robinson, for joining us. We very, very much appreciate it.
Thank you all.
And we will be hearing next from Pamela Fines, and I hope I pronounced that name correctly.
Yes, thank you and good evening, everyone. And thank you all for having me here. Thank you to district leaders and to the Assemblywoman. I am really honored and privileged to be here as I'm beginning my run for countywide Kings County Civil Court Judge. I'm really excited to say that. I am a product of Brooklyn. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I went to both public and parochial schools, which I feel shaped the woman that I am today. I went to James Madison High School in Brooklyn, and then I attended college in Buffalo, SUNY College. Following college, I went to law school in Long Island. I went to Hofstra School of Law. And then I took 2 years, two gap years to save money before I went to law school. And so I graduated from law school and I started my legal career. I always knew that I wanted to do public service. I always knew that I wanted to try cases. And so I was trying to find the right fit. And one of the things that I always wanted to do was work for the Kings County District Attorney's Office. And a lot of people said, well, why do you want to work for them? They're putting people in jail. One, when you work for the district attorney's office, you're working for the people. And one of the things you always say is Pamela Fines for the people. Well, back then I was Patton. Pamela Patton for the people, and people are ready, because I was ready to go. But I never saw myself that way. I saw myself as working for the victims, because unfortunately with every crime, there's usually a victim. And I felt that someone needed to speak for them. And that's been a recurring theme in the positions that I have picked. So working at the district attorney's office, I did all aspects of grand jury. I did regular grand jury. I did narcotics grand jury, sex crimes grand jury. During the time that I was assigned to criminal court, I worked in the Domestic Violence Bureau. I also worked for a specialized unit, investigative unit, where we investigated official corruption, police corruption, and governmental and corruption. Following that time, I went to the trial zones where I learned how to try cases. After a couple of years, I wasn't sure if I wanted criminal law to be what I did all the time. And so then I went to a civil firm and I learned how to try cases, and I learned civil law. And I did insurance defense. I did a lot of car accidents and slip and falls, but I missed the public service aspect of my job. And so after a couple of years, I had to find something else where I got that public service feeling. And so I found my home at the New York State United Teachers, NYSUT. NYSUT is a union side organization, we represent over 600,000 workers, current workers and retirees, both in education and the medical fields. At NYSUT, I see people in crisis. People are coming in afraid that they're going to lose their jobs, and their jobs are everything to people. It's how they feed their families, how they define themselves, and how they support themselves. And so when I see people, I have to meet them where they are, you know, because they are in a critical moment when I meet them. And so together, you know, we work together to try to find the most equitable solution for their particular problem. And I have been doing that for the last 20 years, making sure that employers protect and respect the due process rights of employees, and that they respect their collective bargaining agreements. So I have 30 years of experience, and I've just explained they involve criminal, they involve civil, labor, employment, and education. And so you might be saying, well, why now? Why do you want to be a judge now? Well, I've always wanted to be a judge. And it's so funny, since I started this process, when I tell people I want to be a judge, I didn't realize that I had shared that with people. Many of my friends said, I'm so happy that you're finally going after your dream. But in 2007, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer that had started to spread to my lymph nodes. At that time, my daughter was only 7 years old. And people say a lot of funny things to you when they find out that you're sick. And one of the things that someone said to me was that no one was going to raise my daughter the way I wanted her to be raised, and that she wouldn't remember me if I wasn't around. And so, you know, like some people do, when you're in crisis, you make deals with God. And I made a deal that if I was to able to come through this situation, I was going to dedicate everything to my daughter. She was an only child, and I didn't know how long I had left. And I wanted to make sure that if things happened where I wasn't going to be around for her, I didn't want to look back on my life with regret. And so that's what I did. I dedicated my life to her. And praise God, 4 years ago, she went away to college. She just turned 21, and she will be graduating from college in the spring. And 4 years ago, when she went away to college, I said, well, you know what? It's time, not that she didn't need me anymore. I mean, don't tell her that. But I said, it's time for mommy to do something for mommy. So I joined a political group in my neighborhood to start doing things in my neighborhood, because I believe that people know better when they do better. And so one of the things I did, I joined VITA, the Vanguard Independent Democratic Association, and I joined their legal committee. And I started working on different programs. I'm also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and that is also a service organization. Our model is service to all mankind. And so I wanted to connect those two service projects that I was doing. So I designed projects or programs to advise, inform, and educate people. Because like I said, I think people do better when they know better. Like one of the things that, one of the questions on your questionnaire was that, what did I think was the biggest obstacle to justice, is I think people don't understand the legal system. They don't understand how courts work, why courts work, and what the rules and the policies are. And I think if people understood that better, they would understand what their rights are, and that obstacle would no longer be there. But some of the programs that I worked on in conjunction, I would do them for both VITA and my sorority. Was last year was an election year, so we did something on ranked choice voting, because a lot of people didn't understand what that was. I did something on estate planning. I helped to plan these things, so I'm not the one who presented them, but I got people who had the information to present it to the public. We did something on domestic violence. We did a forum on judicial candidates. We did a forum on almost every office that was running: borough president, mayor, comptroller. We did something on tenants' rights. We did something on affordable home ownership. So I tried to get as much information out there to people as possible. I have dedicated the majority of my life to public service, whether it was in my professional life or my personal life. This is what I do. One of the things that I loved about my job at NYSET was that it allowed me to serve the public, but still be the kind of mother that I wanted and I needed to be to my daughter. And so now that I have 20 years of service to them, I believe that it's time for me to take my talents and move on to the next level. And I believe that one of the highest forms of public service that a lawyer can do would be to be a judge. And I believe that I have the skills, the knowledge, the personality, the temperament to be an excellent judge. I would serve with dignity. I would serve with equity. I would serve with integrity. I would ensure that everyone who came into my courtroom had equal justice under the law. What I do now is I don't try regular cases per se. I do what would be considered a bench trial. And one of the things my clients always say to me is, well, it's the arbitrator that we have, it's the hearing officer. How do we know that they're good? I said, because I tried to pick someone who was smart, who was fair, and who understood the law. And I want anyone who appears in front of me to say, you know what? I believe that she listened to me, she heard me, she saw me for who I was. She knew the law and she was smart, and that she gave me the same equal justice that she gave anybody else who came before her. I mean, I can sit here and talk forever, but I think that's all that I have to say for right now. I'm ready to answer any questions that you have, and I wanted to thank you again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from leaders?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Davila.
Very quickly, is it Miss or Mrs.?
I'm married, so my name is Patton and my name is Fines.
Okay, I'm Spines, I'm sorry. Okay, very quickly, did you fill out a questionnaire?
So I did not fill out a questionnaire because I thought that some of the questions were extremely broad and that I did not have specific facts and circumstances to answer all the questions. One of the things in my office that we don't do is we don't answer hypothetical questions because every issue is specific and factual. And so I did not feel comfortable writing down those answers, but I thank you so much for respecting that right and that feeling, and for allowing me to still come here and present who I am to you and the other leaders.
Right, okay, and right, you're absolutely right. You know, it's not a requirement. It's almost as though we want to be able to know, you know, who you are, right, based on your answers. And this is not to be invasive, it's to get to know who you are, Ms. Fines. And so, but thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Thank you.
If there's anything that I haven't explained to you, just let me know. I'm ready and willing to answer any questions that you might have.
No, it's okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, and we have a question from Ms. Boykin and then Mr. Bazile.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for coming. Sorry you couldn't fill out our questionnaire. I have a few questions. A question, I know you said that it took you a long time to decide that you were gonna run, but I wanted to know, as you were in your experience, who would you say is your mentors on the bench, that's on the bench right now?
So I didn't say it took me a long time to run. I always knew I wanted to run. I was waiting for the right time to run. And this, for me, is the right time to run. So I have a lot of people that have been mentored to me. Judge Priscilla Hall. I did one of my first criminal trials in front of her. She was a mentor to me. Judge Dina Douglas, when I was at the district attorney's office, she was also there, and then she became a judge. And Judge Douglas has always been the example of what a woman should be. She just has such grace and dignity. Judge Patria Frias Colon, she has also been a mentor to me. Judge Colon and I went to law school together, and then we ended up working at the district attorney's office together. So I have a number of people who have always been judicial mentors to me.
Thank you. And before I pass it off to someone else, I just want to ask, because you didn't fill out the questionnaire, there's some things that I feel like I want to get comfortable to get to know you. Like, what do you consider your greatest accomplishment?
So working with teachers in crisis, I feel like I have a lot of accomplishment. Every time I save a teacher's job, I have an accomplishment. But I had one case where a teacher who was dying from liver cancer, and he did not tell anyone that he was sick. So his legs were really swollen. He was yellow from jaundice, and he walked really funny, and his eyes were bulging out. And so some of the students thought that he looked weird, which he did, because when I first saw him, I was taken aback a little. And so because he looked a little funny, they made up some allegations against him that were not true. The department kept offering him settlement deals. And he was in treatment right then and there. And he refused to take any type of settlement, even though he knew he was not going to live much longer, because it was so important to him to clear his name. And so I worked with him between his hospital stays, and we were able to establish from just talking to some of the students. And I hate to say this, but what happened was it was a bunch of girls and one boy. And all the girls had the story straight, but no one told the boy. So when he testified and I asked him questions, he didn't know that he was supposed to keep it a secret, that they had a secret pact to go after this guy. And so we were able to establish that all of the allegations against him were not accurate and were not fair. And so I was able to get all the charges dismissed against him. Unfortunately, he died the day before the decision came out, but I was so happy to be able to tell his wife that I had cleared his name for him and that I hoped that that was going to help him to rest in peace.
Thank you. Good, Julio.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Ms. Patton Fines. I just want to say, as a family of educators, I appreciate the work you do to support teachers. And that story was quite touching. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And now we will hear from Philip Grant.
You gotta unmute.
Sorry. Okay.
No worries.
Okay. I'm Philip Grant, running for civil court countywide, and I'd like to thank the district leaders, the assemblywoman, and my colleagues. And so a little introduction about me. I was born in Bedford-Stuyvesant. I grew up in South Jamaica, Queens, and have been back in Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant, and Park Slope for the last 30 years. My father was from Barbados. My mother was from North Carolina. We're both civil servants. My father was a district leader himself in Queens and later became a judge. My mother was a teacher. Most of my family members on both sides of my family were educators. I grew up in the public school system. I attended public school. I was the first person from my public school to ever be accepted into Amherst College. And then I continued on to Georgetown Law School, where I was the first African-American editor of one of the law journals. I was the lead articles editor of the Tax Law Journal, and I worked in the White House at the same time while I was in law school. After law school, I did not always want to be a judge. I'll just say I started out in what they now call big law, doing very big cases, but found that that was not I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it. And I made a conscious decision to switch to public service like my parents before me. I worked for of the late Justice Johnny Baines as his first court attorney in housing court. Worked with him for 8 years, side by side, sitting with the judge. We had 50 to 100 cases per day, settling cases. During more difficult trials, the judge would have me sit next to him to give advice. 90% of the time, the judge knew exactly what he wanted to do, but 99% of the time, the judge knew exactly what he wanted to do. But in close calls, he would often do a side bench and to discuss things and to render a decision right there on the spot, or to do a quick research. Very good researcher. Anyway, I worked for and making a announcement every morning for 8 years. The judge would have me make an announcement, particularly geared towards the pro se litigants, to let them know that they had no obligation to settle cases. Most cases are settled, of course, but that they had the right to see the judge. No one had to do anything that they didn't want to do unless they were convinced that it was in their best interest, to make sure that they explained, that they understood rather, what the pros and cons are of having a trial versus doing a settlement, what things mean in a settlement agreement, and that there's full transparency. And that making sure that the attorneys are not unfairly, that someone is not unfairly disadvantaged just because they don't have an attorney. That was the primary goal of settling cases, to make sure that that everyone had an opportunity to get an attorney if they could. If they could not get one, that they didn't decide something because they felt they had to. Anyway, I did that for 8 years as Judge Baines' first court attorney. I returned to the judge as his last principal law clerk when he was elevated to the Supreme Court before he passed away. As some of you may know, he passed away during the first week of the COVID pandemic crisis. Very tragic, but in between being Judge Baines' first court attorney, last principal law clerk, I was an assistant attorney general in the New York State Attorney General's Brooklyn regional office. During that time, I was charged with responsibility for hiring, training, supervising the mediation program for all of Brooklyn, supervising the mediators for consumer complaints, as well as prosecuting patterns of consumer fraud, identifying patterns of consumer fraud. And during that period, we did the largest recovery of any consumer case that they had ever done through a regional office, as opposed to one of the larger cases usually went to the main office. We prosecuted our own cases in the Brooklyn regional office. And I had the privilege of being asked to be lead counsel on that case, with the head of the litigation department second seating me. I also was asked to second seat her in a prosecution against the Attorney General himself. After leaving the Attorney General's office, I went back into private practice, where I did a range of matters from white collar criminal law to divorce. I did divorce cases. I did, again, very large civil litigations, small litigations, anything from small claims court to multi-million-dollar prosecutions. I was appointed as a guardian ad litem special counsel in various cases by various different judges to work with people in need of assistance. I wound up spearheading a very large multi-forum, multi-state consumer matter involving a very important issue that's gone up to the Supreme Court, but is still in need of more attention, but basically hidden arbitration clauses, where more and more companies are starting to hide arbitration agreements, or not arbitration agreements, but clauses saying that the person isn't allowed to sue them no matter what. And that's very different from an arbitration agreement where both sides knowingly agree to arbitration, but the hidden arbitration clause. Anyway, worked on that. And then Justice Baines asked me to return to service with him. He asked me 3 times actually, and the 3rd time, which he said it's now or never. So I agreed to rejoin him. My longtime friend and mentor did that. When he passed away during the pandemic first week, I worked in the family court for Judge Titus, now Justice Titus, newly appointed civil court judge from Queens, but she was assigned to Brooklyn. She indicated when I informed her that I was leaving to come back to Supreme Court again to work for Justice Larry Martin, who I work with now. She indicated that she thought she wanted to cry because she said she was very enthusiastic about the what we had done while we were in family court in that short time. But she said she didn't want to, she understood and supported me fully in making the transition back to Supreme Court. I have been involved in various organizations. I was a volunteer for something called the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts for many years before being asked to sit on the board of trustees of a art museum, internationally recognized art museum that focused on, they had a mission of promoting the art of disenfranchised people. That was the mission. It was called the Alternative Museum. And let's see, I'm currently a member of the Brooklyn Women's Bar Association, Metropolitan Black Bar Association, the Caribbean Attorneys Network, the Latino Lawyers Queens, I mentioned the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. I've been found qualified by the Brooklyn Civil Court Screening Committee, and I could talk for another half an hour, another 3 hours, but I think I'm going to end there. Just happy to, I'm privileged to have been asked to speak tonight. I will say that my mentor and former friend, and really Justice Johnny Baines, used to say that when he sits on a bench, he has no friends. All he cares about is making sure that everyone's treated fairly. And that's been my mantra as well. It's nice to have friends, but when we're working. Everyone, the only goal is to make sure that everyone is understood and that justice is served. And I thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Grant. Do we have any questions from district leaders? Ms. Davila?
I'm sorry. Hi, Mr. Grant. So it's going to be similar to the question that I made to Ms. Mines. I see that you have done a lot of litigation in terms of like insurance, landlord tenant real estate, white collar, criminal, consumer protection. I have 2 questions actually in family law. The same question would pertain to you. We are aware that, you know, these courts are inundated with a lot of criminal cases, mental health, and other cases that it can be stressful to someone coming in as a new judge. But unfortunately, I've seen this happen. I've been a district leader for 20 years. And I've seen that the judges that have come in, they place them in these seats that really a lot of people have served and don't want to be there anymore because it is highly stressful. But given the fact that we are seeing such a large number of people coming in with all of these issues, how do you think you would acclimate to this situation, going from civil, white collar, into these situations? And I understand that, lawyers have to be, look at the entire case, but when you walk into this situation, it's a whole different ballgame. It's not the same thing, right? You're going to be seeing these people and placing judgment, so to speak. How do you feel about, if you were to win, how would you deal with this situation?
Well,
I want
I'm
to
happy
know
to,
what would be your roadmap, a very short roadmap to
Mhm.
acclimating yourself into this position.
Thank you for that question. And I think that I would say that I think that that's one of my strongest points, that I don't require any long period of, I am familiar with the housing court, the family court, the Supreme Court, civil court, small claims court, criminal court. I've done criminal cases. That's not been my specialty. No one can do everything. I've done criminal cases, so I'm familiar with criminal court as well. And both small cases, I mentioned I handled 2 gun cases myself, personally, as well as having observed criminal cases over the years. And so the short answer is that while I feel comfortable, and of course, as we know, there's judge school, so there is a training, there's ongoing. It's always there's this. So I'm even whether it's landlord tenant, I've been doing it for 30 years. I'd still need to brush up on my landlord tenant cases. So I would plan to do that with whatever court if I were lucky enough to be elected, whatever court I am, I would continue to brush up, but I don't feel that it would require a long period of acclimation. I would be ready on day one.
I also had a very quick question, because I was looking through your application, and you say that you've given free advice to tenants, small homeowners, and artists. What struck out was the artist part. What kind of legal advice? Give me one example that you would give to an artist.
Okay, so it's so with the volunteer lawyers for the arts, it tends to be 2 types of things. You have both artists who have legal troubles of whatever type, so it's not art related. It's just being a volunteer to help artists, because artists are often struggling artists. And so that's the first thing. However, when I worked with, I worked with the Alternative Museum, and also organization, music high school geared towards at-risk kids, something called the High School for Recording Arts. It's a state chartered school in Minnesota. And I helped the founders get their state charter, and they were trying to get a state charter in New York. That did not work out. But so it could be anything from some art related things are very specialized, so I wouldn't take a very specialized case. I would more explain the process of how sometimes it's explaining where to get this more specialized free advice. But so I think so.
No, that's good. That's good. I was thinking more in terms of like loft tenants and that are artists, and they use their space, work, live environment. So
yes, exactly. So artists.
I got your answer. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And then we have time for one more question from Ms. Boykin.
Thank you. I just wanted to, number 10 on the questionnaire was, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to justice? And I just wanted you to briefly explain a little bit of what you mean in your answer.
Okay, so the greatest obstacles for justice, I believe I said something about diversity or communication.
Implicit.
implicit bias.
On the
So
bench.
these are, right. So, and I said that I think those are interrelated. I think that by increasing the diversity on the bench, it helps to increase the dialogue that leads to the realization that implicit bias is something that one has to consciously work on, as opposed to just saying I'm a fair person. No, you have to actually, it's like meditation. What meditates, you have to, it's a active rather than passive thing to
Okay.
consciously say, I'm going to try to make sure that I'm not letting implicit bias affect my decisions.
Okay. Thank you.
And,
Thank you,
and I
Leah.
think that that's lacking. I think that might be lacking because of the lack of diversity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Grant, for joining us this evening. We appreciate hearing your answers on the conversation.
Thank you.
And now we will hear from Marva Brown.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the district leaders for putting this forum together. I appreciate having the opportunity to be here and present myself as a candidate to you all. I'm new to the Democratic Party in Brooklyn, or as far as participating in the judicial screening panels, these functions, but I'm happy to put myself before you all. I was born in Westchester, raised in Albany, and I came to New York City for college at Columbia University. I fell in love with Brooklyn the first time I came to Eastern Parkway for the Carnival Parade. And when I graduated Columbia, I moved to Brooklyn. I lived in Bed-Stuy for a while, and I've been in Crown Heights for 15 years now. I met my husband here in Crown Heights. We have 3 children. We're raising our children here in the building that he grew up in. My mother-in-law is downstairs with our children. So it's a very strong and wonderful community that I'm part of, and I'm happy to be here. I got involved in the criminal legal system in a weird way. I was raised by a family of corrections officers. My grandparents came from the tombs of New York City. My grandfather eventually was a CO at Sing Sing Prison. That's how our family ended up. How people in their senses jail. And my family said, maybe you can help these people before they end up in jail. And so when I went to law school at Cardozo, I always had it in my mind that I would practice criminal law. I did the criminal defense clinic. I interned at the Legal Aid Society. I prepared myself to be a litigator by doing the intensive trial advocacy program. And from day one, I have been a public defender. And I love the work that I've been doing. I love representing my clients. I love being in court every day. I love doing trials. I'm currently in the middle of a trial right now. So I have many things on my plate, and I think that the life of a public defender is one that prepares you for the bench, because not only am I in court every day making bail applications, working with a team of social workers, investigators, going out in the streets, investigating cases on my own, speaking to not only my clients, learning about their family, their histories, but also speaking to complaining witnesses and understanding how the criminal case may have unfolded and what would result in an equitable disposition, because we know most criminal cases do not end in trials. They end up either being dismissed or negotiated with a plea. So I really love that get up and go part of being an attorney. I am ready to be a judge because in the 16 years that I've been practicing as a public defender, I have learned a lot about people. I've learned about the law, and I feel like I have the experience to give back to the community in a larger scale. I think that we need judges on the bench who are compassionate, caring, understanding, empathetic, and are willing to give everyone, both sides, a fair opportunity to achieve justice. And that is my commitment and what I am going to do when I am on the bench. So I thank you. If you have any questions for me, I'm here.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brown. Do we have any questions from leaders?
Are you running Kings County wide or district wide? I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
I'm still undecided.
Thank you.
I'll say I did run in Municipal District 2 last year. Yes, 2021. Came in a close second, down by 703 votes, but I have a team that believes in me and is well ready to go. It's just a matter of which vacancy I would like to run in.
Thank you.
Hey, Marva. Thank you for being here. I was actually going to ask that question too. What position? But my other question is, can you talk a little bit about, like, I know you ran before, but like, why do you want to be a judge? Like, what is motivating you?
Sure, I'm in court every day, just about, and I've had the privilege of appearing in front of some judges that are fair and impartial and knowledgeable of the law. And I can feel like I'm given the full chance to represent my clients to the best of my abilities and to get the result that's fair and just. And I've appeared in front of other judges who we walk in knowing that it's going to be a loss, right? It's not because the judge is not following the law, but because they have bias. They, will hand a district attorney their opening. They will not be compassionate about my disabled client who can't make it to court on a snowy day because he has a wheelchair and people don't shovel their sidewalks and he's going to be a little bit late, things like that. And so I think my care and my interest is just, again, giving people the opportunity to appear in front of a judge that's going to give them a fair shot. I've wanted to be a judge my entire life. It's something that was one of my career goals. I, could have applied to be a judge at 36 years old, but I had some children, took time off for leave. When I had them, I wanted to get a few more trials under my belt. So that is why, in 2021, I really put the team together to say, okay, I'm ready now, and this is what I want to do. So yeah, just to bring opportunity to people to have a chance at justice.
Thanks, Marva. My last question would be, I heard you speak about this being something that you always wanted to do. I want to know if you could speak a little bit of your background, what you have already done in different courts, or can you name the different courts that you have done work or shadowed another judge? I'm just trying to get a little understanding of your experience.
Sure. When I first became an attorney, I'll say I interned in Manhattan Criminal Court while I was in law school. I've never practiced in Manhattan since I've been a practicing attorney, but I started out at the Legal Aid Society of Nassau County. They made me a job offer first. And I'll say Nassau was like boot camp because it was an extremely biased place to work when you're representing poor Black and Brown people in court. So that was traumatic for the clients and for me as well. But they're happy to have you leave so they don't have to pay you more money as an attorney. So I joined New York City Legal Aid and I worked in the Bronx for 1.5 years up there. The Bronx was actually a great place to work as a defense attorney, just because juries in the Bronx are great. They listen, they believe everyday people. They're not biased towards the police. The judges in the Bronx have great knowledge and experience and life experience that they know what happens on the street. So and even the district attorney's office, I think, was very great in the Bronx and reasonable in being able to negotiate and work out dispositions. But I've been living in Brooklyn since law school. I wanted to be closer to home. So I've been practicing in Brooklyn, Kings County Criminal Court and Kings County Supreme Court since 2010. One thing that I think I should mention is when someone's arrested, the criminal case affects their whole life. So as a public defender, I not only represent clients in criminal court, I also represent them and give them legal advice on housing matters, because you might lose your NYCHA residence when you have a criminal case. There's a lot of landlord-tenant disputes, especially now in the pandemic with the eviction moratorium. You can't evict a tenant, but you can say they assaulted you and get an order of protection from criminal court. So we give advice on housing law. We give advice on family law, because you might have an order of protection in a case where you can't see your children. Employment law, I'm writing letters to state agencies to help clients keep their licenses and keep their ability to work while their criminal case is pending. That's very important. And immigration. You can lose your status in this country if you're not a US citizen with a criminal case. So I have experience in other areas of law as a public defender.
Thank you, Marva. Good to
Thank
go,
you.
Julio.
Thanks
And
for those
we have-
questions.
And we have one final question. And this one comes from the chat on Facebook. We've been monitoring and seeing who's been asking. It comes from Melinda Roscoe, excuse me. Creating a pipeline for up and coming Black women on the bench is important. If elected, will you use your platform to do so? If yes, in what ways?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think working at the Legal Aid Society for so many years, I have a built-in mentor relationship with many paralegals who aspire to go to law school, with law students who work on my cases with me, and then they graduate and go into private practice or starting their own firms or come to the Legal Aid Society, and I still mentor them. And even with the younger attorneys, I'm now considered a senior attorney. And so mentoring the younger attorneys that come through. So being on the bench would not change that. I expect that I would continue having relationships with college students, law students, and younger attorneys to prepare them to take their legal careers wherever they want to go. So definitely, I believe in lifting as I advance.
Thank you so much. And if there are no other questions, thank you so much for your time, and it's a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for having me.
And now we will hear from Siobhan Sanin, and please correct me if I pronounce it right.
That was perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for having me here tonight. Thank you to all the district leaders, Mr. Pena, Olivares, Ms. Boykin, Bazile, Pierce, Naplatarsky, and Davila. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. So my name is Siobhan Sanin, and I'm running for Civil Court, Kings County. I'm not sure, it might be countywide, but we're still making that decision. I'm talking it over with my family, so I'm not 100% sure yet, but I am sure that I'm running. Just by way of background, born and raised in Brooklyn. I went to PS 261 with some of the greatest teachers. Back then it was, I rode the GG train, it was called. It was a little bit dangerous, but it was home. Then I went to Brooklyn Technical High School, where I had some really fabulous teachers and was really comfortable in the neighborhood. When I went to college, I really wanted to go somewhere where I could really make a difference. So I decided to go to John Jay College of Criminal Justice, because at that point I knew I wanted to be an attorney. I did study public administration there because I just had a love for budgeting and I wanted to understand how budgeting worked. So once I graduated, I decided to go to CUNY Law School because that was the best public interest law school that you could go to if you really wanted to work for the people. Although many people discouraged me and said that I would never make any money, I went against that because I knew that I could help people who are just like me. And I knew that it was important to go to a school like that. And it was there that I had the opportunity to work as an intern at the Rikers Island Law Library, where I taught the inmates how to do legal research, because a lot of the inmates there were young kids. They were thrown there and pretty much forgotten about. They didn't even know when their next court date was. So I created a program where I could teach them how to use the law books to at least look up the charges against them so that they could understand and have a meaningful conversation with their attorneys who were representing them, who were mostly assigned to them, court appointed, So I felt like if I could just teach these young people how to at least speak with their attorney, that they would somehow have a chance. And the most heartbreaking thing that I discovered, the first day I taught the class, the students seemed very interested, and one came up to me at the end and he told me that he couldn't finish the class because he didn't know how to read. So I was very discouraged by that. He was about 19 years old, and I gave him some information about some organizations that he could contact, and I encouraged him to still come to the class, because even if you can't read, you can listen and sort of understand and have an engaging conversation with your attorney. And I found that the program was very helpful and useful. By the end of the program, I awarded certificates and gave exams to test their knowledge of what they were understanding. And it gave them a lot of purpose, and it made me feel good that I could sort of give back that way. And I didn't keep in contact with the young man, but I hope that he did learn how to read. And I know that he did get something useful out of that class. So once I graduated CUNY Law School, I decided that I wanted to help more people. I just didn't know where I could do that. So what I ended up doing was starting my own practice. And for the first 10 years after law school, I represented a lot of people for no money. I represented a lot of tenants in Brooklyn. One particular tenant stood out to me because her landlord kept suing her every 4 months. Every time she was about a day late with her rent, the landlord would start a non-payment proceeding against her. And she would call me and I would help her. She didn't really have a lot of income. And so what we discovered was that the landlord was really trying to force her into an agreement that she couldn't keep up with so that he could get the building back, her apartment back, and charge market rate for it. So once we realized that, we got some other agencies involved and I was able to help her. And that's when I knew my calling was to sort of help people in my community. She lived in the vicinity of Brooklyn Technical High School. I grew up on Cumberland Street over there in the Fort Greene area, later moved to Lafayette Gardens where my mom still resides. So I had an affinity for the people in those neighborhoods. I became the first college graduate in my family, the first attorney in my family, the only attorney. And, initially everybody would come to me with every situation that they had. And instead of being frustrated about it, I decided that that was my calling to help, because, if you don't even have a college graduate in your family, then when people have legal problems, they don't know who to call, they don't know where to go. So it was definitely a blessing that I was able to help. From there, I decided to try to help with discrimination cases. So I started to work for the New York State Division of Human Rights, where I represented victims of housing discrimination based on disability, based on race, based on familial status, which is, sometimes we had clients that would come to us, and once the landlord saw that they had children, they decided they didn't want to rent to them. So that was very helpful because those cases can be very difficult to prove. And I remember one young lady who I represented, she actually lived on student housing and she had a seizure while she was at school. And the college told her that she could no longer reside on the campus, on the housing part of it. And so she contacted the agency and she was very distraught because she was in a very bad family situation. So I was able to help her get a very nice settlement so that she could start over at another school. And that was a very rewarding experience, but it also pointed out that there's a lot of discrimination against people with disabilities, against people of different races, of different sexual orientations. And I knew that that was something that I could be effective in helping. So I stayed there for a few years. And then I remember thinking, I really want to be in a position where I could sort of make really deep changes across the board. So I started to work for the Department of Motor Vehicles, where I was a traffic court judge. Now, administrative law is a little bit different from, law in the civil court because you follow administrative rules, right? But you're still dealing with people with issues that affect their daily life. So you may think it's no big deal, but then there's a person before you whose license is suspended, which means they can't drive, they can't work. So as I started to do those cases, I started to take notice of what was happening. And I noticed that most of the litigants who were coming into even traffic court were mostly brown and Black people. And I was wondering why in Brooklyn, which is pretty diverse, why there's such an overwhelming number of only Black and brown people coming into this court. I recall one day a young lady came into the courtroom and she didn't even think that I was the judge. I was sitting there with someone and I heard her say, well, where's the judge? So because there are no African-American judges there, there was only one before me who wasn't there at the time. So that really brought to my attention that the bench really needs to reflect the diversity of the area that it serves, because that makes people have confidence in the judicial system. So if you're in an area where it's, a lot of Black and brown people, but you're only seeing non-Black and brown judges, it really discourages people. So that really encouraged me to really run for this position, because people need to have confidence in the bench, right? So Maya Angelou once said, it's not, people will forget what you say or what you do, but they don't forget how you make them feel. And when people come into court and they feel like they were heard, it really doesn't matter if they win or lose, because at least they feel like the person before them looks like them, understands where they came from. And even if they lose, they feel like the justice system did its job. So I think it's very important that the bench reflects the diversity of the people that it serves. And that really is my motivation for running, to serve the people so that people can really have faith in our justice system. And again, like the numbers are, startling when you look at the statistics of how many Black and brown judges are actually on the bench. And that number needs to be increased. And I think I'm definitely the person to do that. So I absolutely appreciate you having me here to discuss my goals. And I really look forward to your support, and I'm open to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from leaders?
How you doing?
How are you?
Good. My only question, I know you spoke about this in your questionnaire, but maybe you could tell us briefly a little bit of your history when it comes to like what courts you have history with, so we could get to know you.
Okay. So I have done 3 trials in the Kings County Supreme Court before a few judges. I did one case. I represented a homeowner who had a contractor come and charge them exorbitant amounts of money. And at the end, the work was not done. So we had to go to a trial, which was ultimately settled. So that was Kings County Supreme Court. I've represented several tenants in the civil housing court, downtown Brooklyn. I also volunteered for many cases to represent tenants. For most of the cases that I took, if anybody knows how housing court is, before COVID, it was very crowded, very congested. Most of the tenants did not have attorneys. And you see a lot of the attorneys for the landlords forcing people to sign things in a hurry, sign this, and the person doesn't know what they're signing. So I ended up for 3 years volunteering to help litigants on the day of their court appearances, just to even understand what they're signing. Because if you sign in a non-payment case, which is usually settled by an agreement to pay. So if you're agreeing to pay something that you can't possibly come up with in the next few weeks, that's going to turn into an eviction. So a lot of them didn't understand that, because the average person who doesn't understand the law, they're thinking, well, here's an agreement, I'm going to pay this. But if you're already 4 months behind on your rent, you're not going to be able to pay that. No matter what you think you can do, you're not going to be able to catch up. And the landlords and their attorneys were counting on that. So I thought it was very important. And I took a number of those cases, just helping tenants at least understanding what they're signing. I've also represented clients in criminal court. I've represented defendants accused of drunk driving. I represented a gentleman who was arrested for a car that he just bought, so the plates weren't on it, and the officer accused him of stealing it. And I have represented him in that particular case, which resulted in a civil suit against the police that we ultimately settled. So criminal court, I've done a lot of federal court cases as well, but those are the city and state courts that I've worked in. And and family court as well. One of the things that really bothered me in family court, I represented a man who was the respondent in the case. And I recall that his wife was saying that he basically just yelled at her. And I recall the judge on the case was reading a newspaper. And so me and the client are sitting there, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, is he even listening? So my client was really upset about this. And I said to myself, you know, one day I'm going to be a judge, and that's never going to happen under my watch. So you know, I have a lot of respect for judges. I know it's a hard job, but some of them do make mistakes. And sometimes if you don't identify, again, with the people who come before you, you don't have that care and that empathy for them that I would certainly have as a person of color, born in Brooklyn and raised in Brooklyn.
Thank you. Thanks,
Welcome.
Julio.
Thank you. Do we have any final questions? Thank you so much, Siobhan Sanin, for joining us this evening and for speaking with us.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. And good luck to the other candidates as well.
So at this time, that concludes all of the candidates this evening. This video will be up on the internets for a couple of on Facebook, and we'll also be sharing a link where you can watch it outside of Facebook, because I know not everyone has access to Facebook. And we definitely appreciate the candidates spending their time with us this evening, answering questions and letting us understand a little bit more about you. And that is it. Any closing remarks from my fellow leaders?
I do. I just wanted to say thank you all for being such brave souls. I enjoyed having this this kind of dialogue with all of you, because this is the reason why we do these things. It's not to scrutinize or put you under any type of pressure, but it's more to get to know who you are. Because of course, there's never been a process where people really get to engage in this way. It's extremely important that we understand that all of us together, right? Whether you're chosen today or not, your heart is in it, right? All of you said the same thing. My heart is in it. I want to be a judge. Everyone said that. And you were brave enough to come on this, right? This venue that otherwise other judges can say, you know, I don't want to, I don't feel like it. But I want to thank you for doing that, because it's important for us to know and for the public to know who is actually going to be presiding behind these chambers. So I just want to say thank you once again. I wish you all the best of luck. And I am grateful for this experience, and I'm sure that my other colleagues are grateful as well. But thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
Good
all
night.
so much. Have a good night.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Well, thank you. Have a good evening.